All right. This is Brent Raynes for Alternate Perceptions Online Magazine. And it is Monday, February 24th, 2025. And my special guest, once again, is Bob Davis, Ph.D., sensory neuroscientist, the executive producer with the Emmy-winning documentary filmmaking team of director David Beaty and producers William Hawthorn and John Biffar of Dreamtime Entertainment Digital. You guys have been traveling the whole country from coast to coast, interviewing top researchers, scientists, in a film called The Con to be aired on Gaia. And if people missed the documentary, there's Bob's new book, The Consciousness Connection, Extraordinary Human Experiences and the Nature of Reality. And Bob is deep into it all, I tell you. So, Bob, welcome to this podcast.
It's always a pleasure speaking with you, Brent. It's great to be here.
Yeah, it's always good talking with you, Bob. And it's, we, of course, one of the people in your documentary is Nancy DeTortry, who the psychic detective, and we got to sit down and talk for a few hours down there in Clearwater, Florida, a few summers ago, which was really a great experience. And we always talked about finally getting together, and we did it that day.
Yes, you did.
But anyway, so I think it seems like it's been about 3 years that this work on this documentary has been in progress.
Well, it's about that. It's about 3 years, Brent, and came about as an idea from actually a book I wrote. I wrote this book. I don't know if it can be seen. Unseen Forces: The Integration of Science, Reality, and You. And from that, a producer read it, liked it, got in contact with me, and asked me if he'd be interested in doing a documentary about it. So 3 years later, we crossed the country from Stanford University to where we interviewed Gary Nolan to Nevada, California, the Institute of Noetic Sciences, and Faber, Virginia, the Monroe Institute, and Charlottesville, Virginia, where we interviewed Eben Alexander, Joe McMonagill. We went to Durham, North Carolina, where we interviewed the executive director, John Cruth, and the International Association for Near-Death Studies, where we interviewed many leading scholars in the field, like Jeff Long and Jeff Mishlove, and Jeff, who else? Jeff Long, and Bruce Grayson. Unfortunately, we just missed Raymond Moody, but we got ATH Atwater, among others. And but not only did we learn from them, but we learned from those who experienced the near-death experiences and the Kundalini awakenings and all the other varied extraordinary human experiences that kind of acts as an umbrella to a whole variety of different experiences. We learn more from them, and especially once we know people who have these many experiences, whether they be UAPs to anything else. Once we know that they're lucid, they're cogent, they're not putting us on, and they're bothered by it to a large extent. While they find many favorable aspects of it, they may be bothered by it because it dwells on their mind. Why me? What happened to me? What does it mean? They have many questions that remain unanswered from these experiences. And this is why the documentary delves into many aspects of consciousness and how these related kinds of experiences, among others, weave into a portrayal of consciousness studies and where it exists in academia and how varied in definition the concept of consciousness is, Brent. You'd be amazed. I just read an article, for instance. A study was done that surveyed 1,000 articles over the last 10 years, and they found over 30 different definitions of consciousness. So we don't have a unified agreed opinion, obviously. We need one. We need one. Whether that can be devised, I don't know, because it's philosophical on the one hand, it's scientific on the other hand, at both extremes, and they'll never reach a common ground, I don't think. But we need that to define a paradigm shift, which I think is the ultimate goal of the enormous amount of evidence that we've accumulated in ESP and near-death experiences, autistic savants and ESP, past life recall, among many other kinds of altered states of consciousness that also include psychedelic agents as well, meditation, among over 200 extraordinary human experiences that have been identified, and you realize that it's more normal to be paranormal or abnormal than to be normal. In a sense, it's common for people to have these kinds of experiences, and the documentary served to wake people up, I think. It's now streamed on Gaia.com, and I couldn't have done it without the work of David Beaty and Wilson Hawthorn, whom you mentioned earlier. But it's been a 3-year-long effort indeed, one that's hard to believe that it is accomplished. But it is, finally.
Well, congratulations. And, I know it's bound to have been a tremendous effort, and I'm getting some feedback here, but I hope that doesn't interfere too much. I was hearing you fine till I spoke. But someone asked me to ask you a question about, and I didn't write it down, but basically it was your overview on everything. And I think you pretty much just gave the best overview you could, but a lot of these things I know, because I got into it really deep because of a journalist named John Keel. And of course, I wrote a book on John Keel and interviewed other people who had, been influenced by his works and reading about his investigations. And early on, he stated that ufology would have been best served as a branch of parapsychology because there was a lot of overlap in different elements. And I remember in A Strange Creatures from Time and Space in 1970, he stated, ghost apparitions, alien beings, what's the difference? They all go through solid walls and all these other things they have in common. It's just the frame of reference, the way we look at it. Some people have said a ball of light appears in someone's house. They say it's a ghost. It appears outside their house. It's ET visiting. There's so many generalizations. And I know that some people like Greg Bishop of Radio Mysterioso out in LA, he's come up with a term, or someone did, that he's copied from, co-creation, that a lot of us are actually, a lot of the phenomena is kind of a co-creational process. It appears manifest to us and we project on it, and in some ways it projects on us. It's kind of a two-way avenue sometimes. Maybe that's where we get the kind of trickster type phenomena, the mix. It's really hard to tell a lot of times what is something that we're manifesting. And of course, a lot of you people like yourself, Nancy Dutourtree, even Gary Nolan, have had experiences, and they enter the field not necessarily beginning to write a book or become noticed, but they have questions and they're researching. A lot of your researchers, investigators, had experiences themselves, and they get in this field, and then they do their best to try and investigate it further and research it further.
Yeah. Two people come to mind when you mentioned that: Marjorie Wollicott and Jeff Kripal. Jeff Kripal, professor of history and religion at Rice University, wrote a book about 40 scientists that flipped that because of these extraordinary experiences, which range the whole gamut, as we mentioned, changed either their occupation or their major philosophical personal beliefs about important meanings of life. And Margie Wollicott did another study with people who had Kundalini awakenings, the energetic awakenings, spiritual, cosmic-like awakenings. It's hard to explain what it is unless one it is experienced. But it's an enhanced interconnectivity with reality that can be anxiety producing and generally creates an energetic effect on the body. She too did a study with professors and scientists and scholars and found that all of them described a light of some sort that enveloped them when they had this awakening or this extraordinary love and feelings of bliss and expansion of awareness when they received this awakening. But good 80% or so. Remarkable statistics to these kinds of questions that caused them too to flip. Many became health professionals or entered professions where they would serve humankind more so than they have before. They became more humane in the process. And everything we like to say about what we like to think of a person in terms of an ideal human being, that's what they try to transition into, a humane person, more so than they were before. So a relative, of course. And that's what strikes me more than anything about all of this. Most of these people that have these experiences are positively transformed. They are. Not that they can't have distressing experiences. They do. 20% of near-death experiences are considered distressing, actually. That's a large percent, considering 200,000 people in the United States alone have near-death experiences every year. So 20% of that, it's a good number of people that don't receive proper counsel by the health community, or they recognize near-death experiences. They do not know what it is. We do not know that is true, but they do not know how to counsel people who've had these experiences. And Bruce Grayson said at a conference to us that one of the worst things you could do is to tell the person that they have a unique problem. You have to acknowledge that they've had the experience and it's normal and everything is going to be all right. It's nothing to be overly concerned about. But the point is, what was your question? What was your question, Brent?
Well, I know I originally just mentioned about people entering the field because they're looking for answers themselves and about co-creation. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I know until I entered the field myself, I didn't really have a whole lot of. I always told people I've never had an experience. I'm just an investigator. But I went through kind of a religious spiritual crisis back in 1975 when I was very actively traveling from Maine to Florida looking for answers and interviewing people. And I had become, a Christian back in May of 1975. And I was trying to consolidate all together. And I accepted Christ. And then I was told different people, well, have you been baptized in the Spirit? Have you been baptized in water? Well, maybe your experience isn't totally authentic. And I'm like, wait a minute, it felt authentic. So finally, I got to the point where I just said, Jesus, Great Spirit, can you give me a sign, something, that I can chew on, something that I'll know, perhaps in some way it'll help me along. So about 2 nights into that, a little after 11 o'clock one night, I crawl into bed, and all of a sudden I'm out of bed, and I accept this as real at the time. But I'm walking towards, my lights out in the bedroom. My dad's in the bathroom making his last minute pit stops. The lights on in the hallway. Everything seems normal until suddenly I stop in the center of the room, which is a long room, maybe 20-foot long, and I'm halfway across the floor. My bed is on the opposite side from the door, and suddenly I stop, and I'm aware that there's someone behind me who has stopped me. What do I do? Now I only realize this after it's all over. That's not normal, Why didn't I turn around and say, "Hey, who are you?" I didn't feel a hand on the shoulder or anything. In fact, it was like an absence of feeling. In fact, I don't even remember feeling footsteps as I look back on it. And then as I'm looking straight at the door, my eyes are glued to the door with the light on in the hallway. I see looks like hundreds of small, translucent, pulsing white balls of light. And they seem to go down near the floor, and then they seem to be coming together and forming what looks like a small four-legged white colored, the light is white, animal. And then suddenly I'm back in bed, but I was laying on my back looking at the ceiling. Normally when I went to bed and I was bone tired, I would just crawl into bed and pull the covers up and, instead I was just laying on my back looking at the ceiling. So, I've puzzled over the years. What was that? It seemed real, but, it was like, was I in my body? Was I out of my body? Was I projecting it? Was it a sign? I mean, it was. And oh yeah, and the other thing was when I was telling Creator I wanted a sign, show me something that I could, perhaps process meaningfully to myself. There had to be no fear. I didn't want to, I knew an experience of having a vision or something could be quite scary. So, and this experience was there was absolutely no fear whatsoever, and I didn't question anything whatsoever. I was just an observer of this, and then years later, a few years ago, I decided to meditate and try to get answers to some of the things that I had studied and whatnot. And I remember there was kind of a Jungian type meditation I had read about. I think it was called active imagination. And so I kind of read up on it, and I decided to one night go to bed and engage in this process. And suddenly I found myself back in that bedroom up in Maine, where my parents' home, where this happened. And my mother was there in the center of the room, and we hugged. And I asked where Dad was, because they both passed away. And the answer was, he's not there. He's somewhere else right now. And I remember there were other people in the room that made me kind of nervous, but my mother there kind of calmed things down, I guess. And it was soon after that an experiencer here in Tennessee wrote to me. I have since had other experiences that were very synchronistic with other things. But she said, I just had a very strange dream. Would you be interested in hearing it? And so I said, yeah. It seems the night before what happened to me, she dreamt that that I came to her house with a group of people to work on a TV set. And lo and behold, her mother was there, who is deceased, who was also a UFO contact experiencer from the 50s. And there seemed to be like a karma thing, like she knew me at some psychic level and was giving me some advice and telling me that my wife was going to be okay, that I was concerned about her, which I have been because of her COPD. And I thought, well, that was really odd, because there's this, she has a dream of her mother, I have a dream of my mother. And then I think it was about a month after that another person wrote me that saying what I'd interviewed before up in Missouri, that she got a sunburn from a dream. And I thought, that sounds weird. Can we talk? So later that day, we got on the phone in the evening, and we talked about things that were happening. And in her dream, she's in this room, and all these people are gathered. They're kneeling down on the floor, and she's standing up. And her mother, who is deceased, comes up to her and hugs her and says, "You don't need to be alone at this time." And then all this glass windows around, and suddenly this bright flash of light, and then she wakes up with sunburn, And I don't know, there was just all these weird synchronicities around that time that seemed to follow. And so anyway, uh, uh, that's kind of been something that's impressed me. That how these things you can have these synchronicities and these other things that somehow connect with other people, but you're not sure. You know, of course,
Sure.
Gary Nolan says there's the corpus callosum there, the neural
Yeah. Yeah,
network there.
you mentioned that a long time ago when Gary started getting involved in that research about the Corday Puderman and
Yeah, yeah,
how there's increased connectivity in those who are experiencers or show damage in some areas that are unique to experiences, but may be a reflection of higher ESP um, and higher intellect. But he
hmm
has since given up that research, but without any real firm conclusion. Um, Other than people should pick it up. It's quite interesting, in fact, in terms of what it implies. We didn't address Gary Nolan in this film, The Conscious Connection, but we focused mainly on ESP and the history of Bob Monroe, who developed the out-of-body experience, and J.B. Rhine, the Duke parapsychologist who developed, is considered the founder of parapsychology. Many of his methods are still being used today at Duke University at the Rhine Research Center. Much of the research kind of revolves around them in a historical way, but goes
hmm
beyond that as well. But it was interesting visiting both places because they're them IONS Institute of Noetic Sciences, that there's Rice University, there's a Stanford University, a campus here, campus there. The point is, getting back to your excellent question, there are not many people in academia that are brought to this area of study. Uh, I think there's great added interest on the part of the younger generation of scholars entering the fields who are much more open to what we consider to be valid, like ESP, for instance, which certainly is. It's not debatable, and that's one reason alone why a paradigm shift should occur. ESP is valid, and that's quite extraordinary, and there's ample evidence for that. Let alone all the other kinds of wild experiences, one or two which you relayed exist that are largely ignored by materialistic science because they're not designed to explain it. They weren't created to explain it. Newtonian physics has served us very well indeed for a variety of reasons. And it'll always be around because we exist in this 3D world of ours. But the area of quantum processes, of course, is often brought about as a topic of conversation as a basis to explain many of the phenomena that we are addressing. And there are parallels with non-locality and entanglement and superposition, quantum tunneling, aspects of quantum physics that can be extrapolated to the human condition. And let's face it, Brent, we live in a quantum world and weird shit happens, because of that. This is a quantum world, and in that kind of environment, in a different dimension, reality, different things happen that aren't explainable. They can't be explained. And that's the problem with all of this. We know this the phenomena exists from UAPs to ESP and to everything else. These phenomena exist. Proving it is practically impossible, if not impossible. And that's the very frustrating aspect to this all. And that's the paradox that all of us, I think, have to deal with at some level. We know it's real. Our gut feeling tells us that either we experience it or not. But there are enough podcasts, books, etc., on the market that are explaining what is really going on behind the scenes. This so-called cosmic consciousness, ESP, through enhanced spirituality. It is all real. And it's all true. Not every bit you hear is true, but the general tenor, the genre of enhanced spirituality is true. And I think that's something that we need to embrace as society. It's only beneficial for the human being and society overall.
Yeah, there's just too many people with credible backgrounds in their daily life, like yourself and many others. Like you interview many MDs and PhDs in this documentary. You know, they are they're working in these positions in their jobs for years. No question about their integrity and credibility. But as soon as they get onto these other things, it's like a lot of academia is it's falling on deaf ears, and it's just overlooked. Sadly, I mean, you know, parapsychology is kind of the redheaded stepchild of psychology. We hadn't got really, but it's very promising. All the people who are engaging in this now, with as in your book and as in the documentary coming out that are stepping forward. And of course, if you watch Jeffrey Mishlow and his New Thinking Aloud series, I mean, it's just constant. He's constantly interviewing people from so many different backgrounds, and but you have to give it some discerning, objective consideration. I mean, it's. Um, I, I don't see why it. I realize it's kind of a knee-jerk reaction for a lot of people. They just hear psychic phenomena or UFOs and it shuts them off immediately. They shut down. They don't want to. They say, "Oh, I've heard about that stuff. That's nonsense."
Mm.
I'm not interested. I don't know why you're engaging. In that. I've been told. Well, if you ever present something credible, let me know, Brent.
Mhm.
And it's all out there. I mean, yeah, you got to be discerning, objective. Some of it, yeah, is not what you want to put your reputation on, but then some of it, there's just too much evidence out there to just brush it aside and just dismiss it as nonsense. There's elements to it that, as you know, you've had experiences yourself firsthand. So I've had some too that I've had, like, well, I think were precognitive experiences of different things. That's not considered normal by mainstream, but
Mm.
yet there's a lot of people, they're not telling and sharing their experiences just because of the social, resistance to it,
Right.
and the way that science treats it generally.
That's true.
But it's there. And certainly
Well,
Carl Jung was, one of
that
our early
that's
explorers in the field. Yeah,
that's
man, go ahead.
that stigma is lifting to some extent the stigma of parapsychology, ufology being a pseudoscience at best.
Mhm.
I think that stigma is lifting, especially with the last 5-7 years of what's going on with the UAP and the disclosure movement, which really isn't going anywhere very fast, if you know what I mean. But at least there's some progress. Yeah. Um, More people are accepting. It's over like 40, 50% of Americans have said that they have experienced an extraordinary event in their life that has changed them dramatically. that's spiritual in nature. That's spiritual in nature. You know, a lot of that is religious to begin with, and that's another debate between religion and spirituality, one that I'm not qualified to engage in, certainly, but there are similarities and there are differences as well between religion and spirituality, um, as well as consciousness. You know, looking at all three separate, but they are interrelated, uh, dependent variables. They truly are. uh, Western religion versus Eastern religion, the views on consciousness vary greatly. You know, here we believe in monism, materialism, monists, where everything is based on a 3.5 pound fat and protein piece of structure that has 100 million, neurons of cells in the brain, and once it non-functional, it's dust to dust and ashes to ashes. Where in Western culture, Western religion, would not view it that way. They accept the eternity, the continuation of the soul, and so religion and consciousness in that respect, and there are many ways to define consciousness, many different ways to define it, and many aspects of consciousness, as well as altered states of consciousness. So is it a philosophical question? Is it a scientific question? That is something that we also have to ask ourselves, because when we talk about this material, it's very general in nature because there are philosophical overtones to it, and it's not as concrete as we would like. 1 and 1 does not come up to 2 when we deal with anomaly gaps in the form of extraordinary human experiences. It's like people who have near-death experiences who are blind from birth and experience sight for the first time during their near-death experience, and remark that their vision is 360 degrees. For the first time, they realize that vision is 360 and that they can actually see. But they're told, this Jeff Long would say, they're told that we only have sight that's 180 degrees because our orbital socket's in the skull, and they can't believe that vision is in 360. Why is it that everyone who has a near-death experience, for instance, has 360-degree vision? The similarities are remarkable among many of these types of extraordinary experiences, that we need to get a better understanding of not only the objective aspect of it, the flatline EEG and the flatline EKG, and the awareness of the person during that time when a person should not be, let alone they hear and understand things that are remote from the environment. Those types of events or veridical perceptions are events that are the jewels of research in near-death experiences. It reminds me of a story that Bruce Grayson, a psychiatrist, near-death experience researcher, tells. It goes something like this. This guy named Jack had a nurse named Anita, and Anita told Jack that she was going away for the weekend and that another nurse will be taking care of her, but she'll be back on Monday. So while she was away, he had a respiratory distress and had a near-death experience. And during his near-death experience in the hospital, he actually met Anita. And he said, Anita, what are you doing here? And she says, Jack, you have to go and tell my parents that I love them very much and that I am sorry that I wrecked their red MGB. Now, this was in South Africa, Brent, where red MGB cars did not exist, or hardly any of them. So he recovers, obviously, because this is a near-death experience. And he tells the first nurse that he sees when he recovers, and she starts crying, running out of the room. And he says, "What's going on? Why is she so upset?" And then a doctor tells him that Anita went to her parents that weekend, celebrated her 21st birthday, was given a red MGB car for her birthday. She took it out for a spin, hit a tree, and died instantly. And she died at the same time that he had his NDE, where he met Anita. So there's obviously no way he could have known that she had died. And
Yeah.
there's no,
That's
let alone how she died in a red MGB. An event like that made a Bruce Grayson a researcher in near-death experiences. You asked earlier, how do people become what they become in a sense, because of this, and if personal experiences like that motivate them to pursue research in that area. I find that to be true with a lot of people. And you know them for a while, and then later on, they start talking about how they have had extraordinary experiences with how they've seen and interacted with intelligent, non-human intelligent beings, for instance. It takes a while sometimes before they start to come out of the closet. It took me a long time, Brent, before I started talking about my Kundalini awakening that I had back in 1918. I don't ask me why, but I didn't want to discuss it. It was that dramatic. It's hard to explain, Brent, when it's very hard to explain how your mind can feel blissful and your body can be in a different, complete state of its own. And you get a sense of duality, your mind doing one thing and your body doing another thing that you have completely no control over. And that's what happened to me in my Kundalini, that somebody channeled energy of some type into me called Deshpa. That's the term for it, something like that, Deshpa. And sometimes it's done by touch, sometimes it's done through intention. And here it was intention that Dr. Marie Bachelor, the person who facilitated it, channeled the energy through intention that to make me have a Kundalini awakening, where you have a long list of symptoms that are characteristic of it. And no doubt they leave a long and lasting impression upon your personality and how you view people and the world from that moment forward. It is that profound an incident of reality. And when you use the expression one with the world, we're all united, everybody's interconnected. It's easy to say that, but to feel it is another thing. I mean, to feel with a strength that you've never had before is quite extraordinary. But you do feel it for a period of time afterwards. At least I did for a good year or so afterwards. I felt a very strong tie to people who were spiritual, to people who resonated with me, who I liked and they liked me. It worked in just the opposite, of course, for people who I did not like and who may not have liked me for whatever reason. And it hurt more. The hurt was exaggerated and the good was exaggerated. But I also experienced, Brent, a state of anxiety, a pure state of spiritual emergency, a very well recognized psychological condition that has been written up in books on spiritual emergency. And I can't remember the name. I can't remember the name of the author. But anyone having a spiritual emergency following a Kundalini or any other spiritual awakening should read that book.
Yeah. Yeah, I know that I wrote down on a calendar after my experience in 1975, the date. But then I just wasn't sure how to process that experience, you know. So I kept it to myself for a long time. And of course the calendar got thrown away. And so I can only guess it was around the second week of October or something like that. But it was just before, you know, a major event was reported. In fact, there were a series of events, but there was one major case, two men that claimed they had had a close encounter with something, and then they had all these visionary, even poltergeist type experiences. And I called Dr. Berthel Schwartz up on the phone. I was trying to find someone with a good background, you know, psychologist, psychiatrist, maybe do some professional hypnosis. And things didn't all work out that well, but he came up to Maine from New Jersey, and he interviewed one of the witnesses and the witnesses' parents. And I was there. And, you know, he did try for an EVP session, which didn't really work out. But anyway, he went through, then we wrote up myself, co-investigator Shirley Figgett, because Dr. Schwartz wrote an article from that, and then some articles after that for Flying Saucer Review. It was actually John Keel who introduced Dr. Schwartz into the UFO field, you know, to the extent that he did. Dr. Schwartz had been really parapsychology. He happened to write an article for Medical Journal 1968 about 4 cases of people who seemed to be very stable, who had UFO encounters that were worthy of note. And then Paul Harvey picked up the story, and John Keel picked up, you know, a psychiatrist interested in this. So he reached out to Dr. Schwartz, introduced him to Charles Bowen, who was then the editor of the Flying Saucer Review in England, which collected reports from all over the world. And Dr. Schwartz began to write articles for him, and he became very involved. In the 1970s, when I was traveling around the country, I was in constant contact with Dr. Schwartz, and he would tell me, while you're out there, go to visit like Earl Neff, an investigator there in the Cleveland area of Ohio, who formed the CUP, Cleveland Ufology Project, back in the 1950s. I had corresponded a little bit with him, Earl Neff, 4 years before. He was very, the only case on UFO contact abduction was the Betty and Barney Hill case. He had interviewed them. Everybody else, he said, if I give them enough rope, they'll hang themselves. And then Dr. Schwartz telling me in 1975, Brent, you need to talk to Earl Neff. And like, why? And he says, he's become an experiencer himself. His attitude has changed. He's met Uri Geller, seen what he could do firsthand. And he was doing talks, and people would see strange things around him. Someone was running by him on the sidewalk, and thought, what's going on with them? Turned around and they were gone. You know, things would appear and disappear in his home. He heard a voice one time at one of his talks, and the woman came up and asked him, Mr. Neff, why do you think that no one has ever censored you? And this voice behind Neff says, maybe we like what he's saying. And he turned around, the woman looked, and there was just a blank wall behind him. You know, where did this voice come from? And he contacts a MUFON investigator nearby, Larry Moyers, who I found was an experiencer himself as well as a solid MUFON investigator, and said, Larry, please take this woman's statement of what she observed, and you know, um, and some of the stories are, wow, it's just incredible.
Well,
And I know there's people on the fence about Uri Geller, but I've heard enough about some of, read enough about some of the stuff that's happened with him that, yeah, I believe it's. I know that Earl Neff had come across he told me about a radio station that he had appeared on the, the DJ there had interviewed him, and later he talked to the DJ, and the guy said, after Uri Geller left our station sometime afterwards, there was something that fell off the wall, and then but the real big thing was he and two other people at the station were having a lunch break, and out this window, one of the radio towers started crumbling and falling to the ground. And when they got out and looked outside, it didn't happen. But that's what they saw. And it reminded me of the experiences engineers and such had over in California, at that atomic plant where they were studying him. And they were seeing all these weird things like a ball of light going through, the place, or even, not only the metal bending, but engineers would go home, or scientists would go home, and suddenly, and then when they were coming back, they're telling about they saw strange tall birds walking, around the house, or there was this arm with a hook on it hovering over the end of the bed, and two of them were threatening to quit. I don't know if they ever did or not, but the guy from the CIA, Kit Green, was called in, flew from Langley over to Stanford to talk with these people, and they were quite emotional. And of course, Jacques Vallée told me he was called in to be part of the investigation because so many of them, like Uri Geller and Ingo Swann, also claimed UFO experiences. Jacques Vallée said, "I'm the only one who didn't write a book on it."
Well, it just goes to show that reality is far more complex than anyone can ever imagine. It manifests so many different ways and forms. It's truly hard to make sense of it. I do try to make sense of it. I just wrote a recent book. I'm not trying to plug it because I make pennies on the dollar, but it's called A Consciousness Connection. I don't know if it shows on the screen. Consciousness Connection, Extraordinary Human Experiences and the Nature of Reality. And 500 pages worth of the ebook is available. That's probably the way to go. The hardcover, softcover is $32, and 500 pages, awkward to read. It took 2 years of effort. I spent about 4 or 5 hours a day for 2 years. Few days, rarely a few days break. And during that time, I was suffering from a bad back condition. I had sacroiliac joint dysfunction. They didn't recognize it. They didn't diagnose it early, and it was causing great, great pain, intractable pain, where you could hardly walk. And all I can do was lie in bed or recline on a chair at a certain angle that was desirable, and write from that vantage point, which I did, and in a sense it saved me. Every time I look at that book, I think of pain, because it distracted my thought of pain, allowed me to focus on the material at hand. And I cover a great many topics, from, of course, consciousness to ESP, to ESP and autistic savants, which is a very interesting area,
Mhm.
and to
Yeah.
past life recall and synchronicities and UAP and interaction with uh, um, intelligent human beings, non-human beings, that is, um, all requiring a paradigm shift. I'm writing a chapter on that, trying to, I guess, come to a conclusion as to why we should have a paradigm shift. Um, so,
Yeah, I could tell reading through, the digital copy you sent me that you had really gone into a great deal of comprehensive detail on all these different areas, and I thought, wow, 500 something pages. It's a lot of, you covered a lot of ground, and
I had a
I could
lot of
just,
time. I had nothing else to do. To be very honest, I had nothing else to do. So it was self-soothing in a way. And my whole career, Brent, revolved around researching and writing. That's what I did as a professor. So in a sense, it came natural to me to research and to write. And that's how I learned a lot about this general topic area. And the more you learn, the more people delve into the research, the more convincing it becomes, um, to realize that ESP again is real, that healing at a distance is real, that within reason, that humans are interacting with non-human intelligences. In fact, Russ Galpone, a good friend of Brent and mine, when we were members of FREE, the Edgar Allan Mitchell Research Foundation for Researchers Extraterrestrial Experiences, back in 2018, 2019, when we were members together, and he and I just co-authored a paper that was submitted into a journal, where he studied the Phoenix Lights. He studied the individuals that experienced the Phoenix Lights, about 115 or so of them, and gave them Kenneth Ring's questionnaire, along with many of the questions that FREE also used in their survey of 2,336 whatever individuals. And he found
yeah,
tremendous similarities between the two studies. It was eerie. The majority of them felt positive, that it was a positive experience. 54%, 55%, so that had a slightly a higher positivity impact on their lives. It was lower than the free study. In the free study, you recall, about 75, 80% of people viewed their overall interaction experience with the UAP or the uh, non-human intelligence as positive. But there was remarkable similarities, which make you wonder. It just adds to the validity of the free results, because less than a quarter of those that of the Phoenix Lights participated reported having conscious memories of being aboard a UAP craft, and that was very similar to free. And about over 1/3 of the Phoenix Lights experiences felt a strong bond or a sense of connection to orbs or lights, which is hard to distinguish between what a UAP is and what an orb is, during the event, mirroring a comparable result in the free results. So
yeah.
most in the free were wide awake and moving during the experience, and so were the people in the Phoenix Lights experience. Most were awake, wide awake, It was hyper real, engaged all the senses. They recall most of the details without the aid of hypnosis, which is critical. And again, it aligns with Free, and it aligns with some of Kenneth Ring's observations as well, who also found that more than 2/3 of the people experience paranormal phenomena too, such as ghosts and orbs and electrical malformations, along with an increase in intuition of psychic abilities. Many people claim that they do have enhanced psychic abilities after they have these kinds of experiences. So, different time, different place, but the same suit, if you know what I mean, the same similar kinds of outcomes. Got to be careful because the numbers are quite greatly different between those in the Free study and those in the Phoenix Lights Experiences study. But they also receive messages that are spiritual. They report receiving downloads, so to speak, that are very spiritual, that have to do with how they can improve themselves or how they can help others, or the future, how they can help people. And they come away with a very sensitive, very, very sincere, positive feeling that most of the messages were spiritual in nature.
Yeah, interesting response, as opposed to being, dismissed as just flares. you know, um, I know that was one of the popular explanations for the Phoenix Lights was flares, but a lot of people said they were seeing something different from just flare.
It was seen
activity.
over 4 states, Brent. It was seen over 4 states. So flares don't behave that way, including Mexico.
Yeah. So I guess the Four Corners. Anyway, that's interesting. Yeah. Well, I guess we won't be able to convince everyone here, but we, for the open-minded, giving you something to chew on. And there's certainly a growing interest in making correlations that keep resurfacing. I know that back in the 70s, though, I thought, there were various authors, John Keel, Jacques Vallée, Brad Steiger. It seemed like there were some observations they were making that should have expanded the field back then, but it seemed like things go in cycles. There was an openness to all the paranormal things, and then suddenly it shifted, and people started talking more about Roswell crash saucers and stuff. And it comes and goes. Hopefully, we're on a right now. There's I remember a year or two ago asking Michael Grosso if he thought that things were changing, and as I recall, his response was, "Well, there's a promising number of people who are interested in a lot of this, these various areas, but at the same time, there's still a lot of opposition." But anyhow.
That's why I'm not hopeful for disclosure. They announced that they recognize that there are unidentified flying objects in the skies, but that's a declaration. But it doesn't go as far as we want. We say the same thing. But what we mean when we say it, we mean that they're from another universe or interdimension. What they mean is that it's just materialistic. It just hasn't been identified. And in fact,
it's drones, right?
Yeah,
it's just drones or something. Yeah. But that was interesting. All that drone activity, so-called, at over 5,000 reports in a very short period of time, and I still don't understand how Langley airfield there 17 nights in a row, and no one ever nailed it down. I mean, drones flying over that. I know maybe you don't want to shoot something down over populated area, but it seemed like they could send a helicopter up and have since that sort of a military base should be prepared for any kind of activity like that to identify it and respond. But I don't know.
Well, there's no doubt we have some very remarkable ultra high tech drones ourselves. I'm sure they're part of the Jersey drones as well. It quickly went away in the news, if you notice. There's no more discussion of it. It's like the flap ended.
Well. Yeah, it's of course, flying saucer era, as it's called, began in 1947, but there's been strange things seen in the skies going back centuries and centuries. So I don't know.
So, look, Brent, we simply, for one, if a UFO was identified and was in the hands of a foreign power, certainly that power wouldn't want to announce that they have it, for fear of information about that power being leaked out to other nations to use as a weapon for destructive purposes. That's where countries come from. It seems that they address whether or not there is secret weapons that came from crash sources, so people suspect, which have been reverse engineered, so people respect. The alternative energy that's used, of course, which is not oil, would also obviously have a great effect on our oil reserve industry, which subserves many other important industries in America. So there would be a socioeconomic cataclysmic reaction in some way, which will have religious overtones, of course. If it was ever announced that, in fact, we do have secret craft, that have been that have crashed, and we have their occupants, and here they are, ladies and gentlemen, on the 6 o'clock news. I don't see that ever happening. I even if it is true, and I'm not saying it is or it isn't, but if it's true, I don't see it happening.
Yeah. So it's all dependent on the civilian sector for whatever we can produce, and but it's interesting to follow what has been done and what people are doing who are scientists who work within the government sector, like Hal Puthoff and Gary Nolan, Christopher Kit Green, what we find out from them and what avenues they approach. But yeah, it's still up to so many of us, just boots on the ground, doing what we can do in the meantime. Yeah, I calculated recently. I've been a ufologist now for 58 years and 1 month, and what I had hoped to accomplish at the beginning, I haven't accomplished. Mm-hmm. It's an uphill climb, but of course, when you're a kid, 14 years old, you think, oh, I can, I can get to the bottom of this. Mm-hmm. But anyway, well, Bob, I really appreciate you taking this hour here to
thank you.
This interview.
Thank you.
It's been too long. Thank you. So anyway, unless there's anything else that you wanted to
no,
add.
I just like to say, encourage people to see the film on Gaia.com, Gaia, Gaia.com, and to consider buying my book, The Consciousness Connection, Extraordinary Human Experiences and the Nature of Reality, which can be obtained on Amazon. And the film and the book are of the same title, The Consciousness Connection. So thank you, Brent, for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Bob. Oh yeah, and one other thing. The documentary, is that going to be one film that they're going to see, or is it going to be a series, part one, part two?
It's right now it's of course one film, and the intention is for it to become a docu-series, where there'll be other films that'll be spun off it as a result. Yes.
All right, awesome. All right then. Well, thank you very much, Bob. If you'll maybe just stick around just a few minutes after I shut off the record button. But thank you very much, and you take good care.